Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. I hope everybody can see me all right. The light is a little weird. Let me back up a bit before we get into it. The light is still weird. Anyways, um, so the book we are talking about today for this month is Tarbell's Course in Magic. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this book, and we're going to go into this. So this is a course in magic that a magic publisher. I don't know if it's a magic publisher. The publishers were T. Grant Cook and Walter A. Jordan, who were running correspondence courses back in that time. What a correspondence course was you would sign up for the course and you would get mailed to you lessons every single week. They were doing this in the mid 1920s. And originally, they reached out to Houdini. They approached Houdini. They asked him if he wanted to design the course in magic. He said no. This is Harry Houdini we're talking about. And this was a few months before he died. He said no, but he recommended Tarbell. The original publishers hired Tarbell and Walter Baker, who was a Chicago-based magician. Baker dropped out so that he could focus on his performances. So that's why it's known as Tarbell Course of Magic. I think it would have been cooler if it was the Houdini Course of Magic, but it got left to Tarbell, who is also a very good magician of his day. The publishers agreed to do this with Tarbell, and they gave Tarbell $50,000 for the course. I don't know exactly how much $50,000 was back then. $50,000 in the 20s. So $50,000, I mean, in somewhere in the 1920s, is worth about over 650,000 US dollars today. Just to give you an idea of how much they paid Tarbell. So it was like a real book deal that a publisher would give an author nowadays. If you have an author writing a book for a major publisher, that's about the deal that they would get plus royalties. I mean, they usually get paid pretty well, depending on how well they are known, which is very curious to me. I'm not too sure how well known Tarbell was, but he got paid very well. So they must have respected him, and he did a good job. Another thing to note is originally, I believe they sold 10,000 copies of this course, the course that would become Tarbell, which is a lot of copies. Usually when a magic book goes into print today, the publishers will print a few hundred copies. If it's a really big book, they'll print a few thousand. To give you an example, a book by Juan Tamariz will print a few thousand. I'm not too sure how many thousand, but a few thousand. Probably not 10,000 though. David Roth's Expert Coin Magic, I think, was only printed with 5,000 copies. So just to give you an idea of how, which is a very popular book by the day, David Roth Coin Magic, great book, but 5,000 copies. So Tarbell selling 10,000 copies of his course in the 1920s is quite remarkable. I'm very curious as to how they advertised it, because today it would be, I think, very difficult to sell 10,000 courses. Anyways, Tarbell finished the course in 1928. The original package, the original course of lessons was 60 lessons long, and it had over 3,100 illustrations. So it was a massive, massive project. Tarbell would write in his book that there's a very big difference between a magician and a man who does tricks. Fundamentally, the making of a magician is no different than the making of other professional people. One must be trained in the mechanics, the alternate methods, and be skilled in the presentation in order to meet any conditions which may arise. And most magic courses, or most beginners magic books, I mean books designed for people who are beginning in magic, usually skip all the really technical and psychological details, and they usually focus on very simple tricks with very simple secrets. They call them self-working card tricks, or self-working tricks in general. Tarbell took a different approach towards designing this course. He started off by touching on the history of magic, the psychology of magic, the role of the magician, marketing, how to move, and sleight of hand techniques. He really covered the whole gambit. His whole idea, his whole purpose in designing the course was to create really good magicians. That was his purpose. It wasn't just to make money. So between the years 1928 and 1931, there were over 10,000 complete courses sold. Now, that is, as I said, quite a lot of courses, very remarkable. And the reason why they stopped selling so many courses was the Great Depression. People didn't have that much money in 1931 to pursue a magic course, so the sales went down. But it's very curious. I'm very curious as to how they marketed the original course. I'm not too sure on how they did that. I will do research and get back to you, because I don't think you could sell 10,000 copies just by advertising in the magazines they had in that day, such as the Sphinx, the MUM, and the other magic publications. It just doesn't work out mathematically. So they must have been doing some sort of marketing in newspapers and regular books. I had to look up the publishers. They were probably big publishers, and they probably had the marketing apparatus in order to sell 10,000 courses, because 10,000 courses is a lot. It's just a lot. The way that it was originally designed is the courses were, the whole course was broken up into 60 lessons, and they would mail you each lesson individually. So you'd receive one per week or one every 2 weeks. I'm not too sure what their timeline was, but you would receive it over time. You wouldn't just buy it and it would all come to you. You'd receive it in pieces, serially, so you could work on it and then be ready for the next part, which is actually really interesting. Okay. To move on, in 1941, Louis Tannen purchased the rights to the course, and he worked with Tarbell and Ralph W. Reed. If you know who Ralph W. Reed is, he also wrote magic books to convert it into a book form. So what you see now, this is just volume 1, but expanded is the Tarbell lessons compiled into book forms. Right now we have Tarbell volumes 1 to 8, which is much larger and contains material, I believe, from Harry Lorraine, David Roth, and a bunch of contemporary guys who added to it later. But I think volumes 1 to 5 are the original course in book form. They, however, broke it up into different articles and reorganized it. But let's go and one of the reasons I know, I never even knew this stuff before. One of the reasons I'm so intimate with Tarbell is I have a personal history with Tarbell. When I was running the Conjuring Arts Summer Book Club, some of you guys might remember that. I would make a PDF of Magic Book every single week, and then we'd send it out to the world. We started, our first year was in 2013, and to end that year, we wanted to do something special. We had done a lot of books. But Bill Kalush asked me, why don't we do Tarbell? That would be really special. And what Bill meant by that is, Maddie, why don't you do Tarbell? So I had 2 weeks to turn Tarbell into a PDF, and I believe the PDF that I made is over 1,430 pages long, and it really did take 2 weeks of my time. We had somebody scanning each page of the original course in these giant flatbed scanners, and I was turning it into a text-based PDF. So I was laying out all the text, all the images, and it took me. I mean, I remember those 2 weeks very well. I was working on it pretty much all day and night, and when I say all day and night, I mean all day and night. Maybe 14, 15, 16 hours per day. And I got finished on the morning of. I stayed up all night to finish. And I think I only finished at like 5 a.m. And the reason I remember that is I had gone with my friend Ricky Smith to go see another magician named Steve. Oh, I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. Steve something. And he was doing a magic show in a laundromat in New York. And we went out, and it was a great show, good time. And everybody was hanging out later, but I had to go home to finish Tarbell. So, and I did finish Tarbell. We finished early that morning, and then about noon, I went to sleep. I woke up. I had to send it out about noon that day. Went out into the internet. We advertised, and over 4,000 maybe magicians downloaded Tarbell. So you can do the math on how many pages of magic that is, but it was quite a lot of pages, and that to this day is the most books we had downloaded of any single book. Maybe the expert at the card table beat it. I'm not too sure. I think Tarbell though came in the lead. But yeah, that was my involvement with Tarbell, relaying out the book. So if you guys do want to buy it, instead of buying this, so this is the hardcover book form, by the way. This will retail if you get all the complete sets, volume 1 to 8. So 8 of these thick books. It'll cost you about $250, maybe 200. I'm not too sure, but it's expensive. However, if you go on the Conjuring Arts website, you can buy the version of the PDF that I made for Conjuring Arts. All the money that will come in through that sale will go to supporting the Conjuring Arts Research Center. So I definitely recommend doing that. As I have to say, I did a very good job on the PDF. It's a great ebook. So let's keep going through the history of this book, because it is a long history, and it's funny how it winds through the decades. Excuse me, I'm just drinking some coffee. All right, where were we? By the way, Tarbell is extremely popular. There's a lot of people who study Tarbell. I talk to people all the time who come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, I was doing magic when I was a kid or when I was a teenager, young man." It's usually guys saying this to me, and most of them mention Tarbell. So I think there were a lot of copies of Tarbell sold throughout the years. Let's go through the original lesson plans. Okay, so this is interesting. I did not know this, or maybe I knew it, but I forgot. Because the original lessons are not identical to the later published books. The lessons, so there were 60 lessons, as we said. Lessons 1 to 15 came out in 1926. So I'm assuming that if you subscribed to this in 1926, you got 15 lessons that year, which is about one lesson every single 3 weeks. So probably you would enroll, and every single 3 weeks you would get a lesson, give or take a week. Lessons 16 to 40, so that's another batch of lessons. That's about 25 lessons. I don't know how the timing was on this, but lessons 16 to 40 came out in 1927. Lessons 41 to 56 came out in 1928, and lessons 57 to 60 came out in 1929. So it's just interesting to note, for those of you magic buffs, you'll know that Houdini died in 1926 on Halloween of 1926. So it's sort of a good thing that Houdini did not take on this project, or we may have never had Tarbell. We may have never had Tarbell. So Houdini said yes and died right then. We probably would have not had a complete course like we have today. Just a curiosity. So the way the original lessons were laid out, they were in 60 lessons. And I'm just going to read off the title of lessons, and then the lessons in order of the original release. So, and I'll write all this stuff later, but I want to go through it, and then we'll talk about it. So lesson number 1, the history of magic. Lesson number 2, the history of sleight of hand. Lesson number 3, necromancy and divination. Lesson number 4, development of superstitions. You know what? I'm not just going to read them. I'm going to comment on them because this is quite interesting. And lesson number 5, magic and religion. Lesson number 6, magic and the science of medicine. So these first 6 lessons, you'll see them in Tarbell today. They've sort of been broken up into essays at the beginning of the books. But I remember them quite well because they were sort of one of my first introduction to the history of magic. Now, we've all read about some people who were extremely famous in magic: Alexander Herman, Mellini, Houdini, Thurston, all those guys, Dante. But there is a history of magic before that, a history of magic which predates theatrical magic. And this was magic that was used by wizards and shamans of ancient civilizations to provide value to their citizenry. Let's just leave it like that. And these were people who would heal people. These were people who would divine things, so they could tell the future, they could control the weather, they could they apparently had special powers and could control somewhat the forces of life and death and nature. And why is this interesting? Why is this interesting? It's interesting for a few reasons. One of the reasons I find it interesting is there was a time where the performance of magic was sort of mixed with this. There was a time where magic was believed to be real. In ancient Egypt, it's very clear, and some medieval Europe, and in different cultures at different time, magic was a real thing. Now, I can't comment on whether the magic they were doing was real or not. I highly suspect that they were using deception, much like we do today, but that people didn't realize that they were using deception. And because of this, they were able to extort great power over the culture. Usually in ancient cultures, for those of you who study history, you'll know that many of the ancient kings were held a dual role of a warrior slash shaman, which is means that part of their role in ruling was physical force, and the other part was a spiritual force. And it's very interesting that you can sort of see this when you read history about the people who were performing magic at different times, different time periods, and what they were doing. The earliest magic performance that I mean, besides ancient texts, the first drawing and writing that I think the first, you know what, it may not be the first because there's examples of magic in the Bible. But one of the first, which is mentioned here, is the performance in ancient Egypt by a conjurer called Didi. So that's Dedi, although you can translate it as anything. And he he would pull off heads off of chickens and reattach them onto other birds. I'm trying to find it in here. This is such a big. Okay, so it does talk about the magicians in the Bible. The Magi or wise men of the East, Zoroaster, the Magus. Very interesting. The where the word magic comes from. It's from an old Persian word called magi, which just means to be able. It means to be able. So that's what the I forget what it's called. Not a where the word magi comes from. When you shorten it and you take the I don't know why I can't find the word I'm thinking of, but it goes back to magic. Very interesting. Then it talks about the magic in Christianity, magic of Greece, the magic in Rome, and after the fall of the Roman Empire, sort of the magic that was written about different times, the Arthurian romances, the magic in 1001 Nights, the Arabian type of magic with genies and sand gins, desert gins, all that stuff. And then it breaks off. So what's interesting is it keeps all this magic from before a certain time together, whether it's magic presented as theatrical magic or modern magic, and actually it defines that. So it says the two divisions of magic, and it says ancient versus modern magic. So, and it defines everything as ancient magic, which apparently has a supernatural cause. So these are people who are performing, apparently real magic. Today, I think you would put, different psychics and faith, healers in that category. Those people who do psychic healings and people who have psychic powers, you would put in that category because what they're claiming to do is real. Again, I'm not claiming it's real, but they're claiming that what they're doing is real. So we're going to put them in a different category. And then what we call modern magic, which is people like me who are performing magic as a performance in a performance setting for the purpose of entertaining. So that is where we draw the line. And then again, it keeps going on and on about how these two types of magic always clash throughout the ages until finally the modern magicians started taking on the ancient magicians. Really started the whole skeptical movement with first Keller and then Houdini, who really made it big, taking on the spiritualists and debunking them, showing how to fake seances, showing how to fake different feats that these psychics would do. So those are the two types of magic. Goes into the history of magic. I just want to clarify on that because it's very interesting. Uh, Comment by Jaroslav says Moser once gave a great presentation of a vase that changed water to wine long time before the Christ. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, people, there's a ton of miracles in the Bible and in ancient texts, and there's a long recorded history of magic and magicians. It's something I'm very interested in. I'd actually love to write a book about it, sit down and write a serious book. Some cultures around the world that are sort of, I don't I don't want to call them primitive, but I think the magic that they're performing is very primitive, and you see it in countries like Haiti and in the Amazon and different forests in Venezuela, different places. You have cultures that have sort of are still practicing ancient religions, and part of this is they have shamans performing rituals and spells and different things. And many times in Native American culture too, basically in every single culture, you had people performing stuff very similar to what we sort of perform now in the work that we do. So I always find it interesting, and I would love to do a proper study on it because I don't think it's been done before. The truth is, people don't know about it. I was just in China, and many cultures sort of forget about their history of magic for a lot of reasons. It might be because of the government, it might be because of the culture. It might just there's a lot of countries that their history of magic has disappeared, and their supposed history of magic only goes back like 30 or 40 years, which is not true. It's just not true. Even for my friends watching from Poland, probably doesn't have a lot of recorded history, but I can guarantee you that there's been magicians performing there for hundreds of years because I've seen records of magicians traveling through Poland, 300-400 years ago. So, anyways, something I'm interested in, want to bring it back. Let's keep going. So that covers lessons 1 to 6. Then going to lesson number 7, the rope and tape principle, which I don't really remember that, but I'm going to look it up because there's so much in this book. It's really a massive book, and I don't remember everything. But let's keep going. Lesson number 8, the relation of magic to other sciences. Now, this is very interesting. This talks a lot about how people have used magic and used science in their magic, and it talks about the history of some of these old temples in ancient Greece, which use scientific principles to secretly move giant doors and chambers and make so-called magical things happen mysteriously. Very, very cool subject. Then moving into lesson number 9, we have the principles of card effects, which is sort of more the magic we do, getting into that. Lesson number 10, confidence and enthusiasm. I'm going to say that this is one of the best chapters in the book. A lot of times people open magic books and they just want to read about the tricks and the secrets of the tricks and how they work. And that's all great. I love that stuff as well. But I found that some of the greatest books, especially written by seasoned performers such as Tarbell and Hugard and Browie, you have these chapters on presentation, confidence, and enthusiasm when performing magic, which when you read it, and if you really take that advice in, it's going to make you so much better at what you do. So please read those presentation chapters. It's all about creating belief and creating the atmosphere and how to present yourself. You're a magician. You have power. You have you can do impossible things. There's something about that I can tell you has been lost today, because I see a lot of magicians and it's just they're going through the motions, and they do not feel like powerful people, and that is a big problem, in my opinion. But let's keep going with the book. Lesson 11, we have the penetrating ring. Also ties into the Japanese thumb tie. I've never been a fan of the trick, but I find it very interesting. I love the penetrating ring. Uh, Lesson number 12, the cards that pass in the night, otherwise known as the cards up the sleeve. Now we go to lesson number 13, the regular pass, the card stab, extremist ray knife, the magnetic knife. Now, mind you, these lessons contain more. I'm not going through everything. I sort of compiled a table of contents by putting just some stuff from the old lesson together. There's a lot more in the actual book than what I'm mentioning. But I find it very interesting. If you pay attention as you go on in the original lessons, you'll see how it makes sense that they were sending these out every few weeks. So you'd have time to learn how to do a pass. You'd have time to learn how to pick up each skill, a palm, a shuffle from the previous lessons, and then work them into the new material that was coming a few weeks later that used it. It was a really, I think, revolutionary way of teaching magic. Which I think is lacking today. You sort of pick up a DVD today and everything is right there in front of you. It's not the same. It's really not the same. This course and books in general really make you work for it. But I think giving that space is really special. I should consider that. I've always wanted to write a magic book that's a serial that you would get piece by piece. So might do that in the future. Don't know though. All right. Lesson number 14, the force. Producing a card from a whole orange, the card and the banana. Producing a card from fruit is a very classic plot in magic. Producing bills from fruits, just producing rings, producing common small objects. It's extremely powerful when you do it. I should say that every single magician should have something like that in their set. The reason is it's so different and so memorable. Let's say you're doing a 15-minute, 20-minute set of card magic, coin magic, what have you. You have one effect with a lemon or an orange or an egg or pineapple, passion fruit, what have you. And you do that, it's so different that it really sticks in people's minds. People don't remember everything when they see magic performed. They only remember a few key moments, but that is one thing that they usually remember just because of how different it is. It's also really impossible when you're watching it. Okay, lesson number 15. We have a guide to card position. So this is very deep in card manipulation, palms and shifts. I'm not going to go over through the name of every single effect, just because it's in the book. There's no point in me calling them out. Lesson number 16, it talks a lot about the card magic and new era card tricks. New era card tricks, that is not on my book club list. I should put that on. Rodeberg, great book. New era card tricks. You guys got to check that out. It's been theorized that a lot of the material in Ernest is inspired by the material in New Era card tricks, or that maybe Ernest supplemented the card trick section with the magic from New Era card tricks. It's a great book on its own right. It's a book you should study. And I just want to say, a lot of this older magic, you're going to go through. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what happened to me. I went through Tarbell, and it's not a bad book, but a lot of the material is very old, and the methodology is very old. And this is one of the problems in magic. There's so much magic in the world, but there's so little, not so much, there's so little that's going to suit you as a magician, as a performer. So you really do need to take the time to go through giant books like Tarbell, which you will read, and you might get bored at some moments because the quality of some of the material just doesn't, you can't do it today. There's some props in this book that you can't use today, but you will find gems of material and really, really cool ideas that you can use. So always keep that in mind when you're reading an older book. Sometimes they're really hard to read, which is why I think most people don't read them, but there's always really clever stuff inside them that you can redesign for yourself. Let's see. It says, we have a lot of Slavic magic, and I'm not talking about vodka. Ron Wilhelm says, the book Tarbell Study Guide by Steve Burton contains the original course order, but referencing the books. There's also a volume 9 of Tarbell that was published, but it's not tricks. I believe it's a biography on Tarbell, but I'll talk about it in the end because I have some notes on it. I have not read that, but I do have some notes on it. And I believe also either maybe in volume 7, Harry Lorraine also indexed in one of the later volumes all the material from the book. So you can really look at it through an index of like, oh, I want to find all the card effects in Tarbell, or I want to find all the stuff with coins or, handkerchiefs. Harry Lorraine has indexed that in, I believe, volume 7. Don't quote me on that though, check. And it really allows you to find the material you want to find because it's big. In a book like this, you want to use Post-it notes. I'm a big fan of using Post-it notes with my book. I don't really like writing in my books, to be honest. Sometimes I do write in my books. It just bothers me. I don't know why. It gives me stress if I write in a book. I just feel bad about it. But I use Post-it notes. And Tarbell, I would suggest using Post-it notes for because you can really go through and write a little note, stick it in. And for me, it's great because I'll go through a big book like this. Great. All the information is coming in my head. 2-3 weeks later, all that information is out. There's a very common idea in magic, which is most people learn and forget thousands of tricks in their lifetime in magic. We sort of learn a lot and forget a lot, and we remember principles and ideas sometimes, but it's very hard to remember material that you're not using every day. So take Post-it notes, leave those Post-it notes in the book, leave it in your shelf. When you come back to it a few months later, a few years later even, that'll be there for you to pick up and you'll be like, oh, wow, yeah, I remember this. Or you'll open it, you won't even remember. You'll say, what the heck is this? Oh, wow, this is interesting. Or you might open it and you say, okay, there's nothing here. That's just how I guess we evolve in magic. Sometimes we have to take notes of things. I'm a big fan of taking notes. What I love to do is now with video is I take video notes. I highly recommend taking video notes, especially if you have a platform like YouTube, like what we are on here. You can do a live stream of a rehearsal of a trick or an idea. You can send that as a private video so only you can see it, and you can sort of keep a catalog of material because you will forget a lot as the years go on. Also, keeping written notes will help you because we all go through a lot of material. It's the truth. And you need to go through a lot of material in order to develop your taste, to develop your sensibilities in magic. My friend Ozzy Wind always says you need 3 things in order to become a great magician, or at least have a chance to become a great magician. You need to consume a lot of magic, which means you need to read, you need to see, you need to be getting that magic inside you, seeing it, hearing about it, and reading about it. That's number one. Consume. Number two, produce. You need to be creating a lot of magic, working on many routines. Consume, produce. And number three, you need to be critiqued. After you've consumed, after you produce, you need people to see your work and to tell you whether it's good or not and how to improve. And you just keep that as a cycle, and it will make you better. It will also help you develop your taste. Taste is very important magic. I can't really talk about it now because we're talking about Tarbell, but taste is very underrated. I would rather taste than creativity any day of the week. You can put the top 20 creative guys in magic in the same room, and if you have them design one show, you will not have a good of a show as if you had one person who had really good taste but could not create anything. Let's just leave it at that. That's my opinion, by the way. Everything I say is my opinion. Jur's Law says most magicians pursue a strange road of creating magician foolers rather than creating good magic for laymen. Yeah, you don't really need to create magic. We've sort of been sold a false bill of goods, which is you need to be really creative in order to be a good magician, and you need to create your own magic, and it's just not. It's not true. It's just not true. You name the top magicians performing today. You can name them. We all know who they are. Some of them have created some stuff. A lot of them are performing very classic material. Maybe they're doing it in new ways. There's a creative side to that, but they're not, reinventing the whole bench. All right, let's keep going. Rising cards is in lesson 18, lesson 20, the enchanted cards and envelope. Interesting. Lesson number 20, how to please your audience. This is also very important. These chapters on the spectators and spectator management and career advice, it does not age. I mean, it's as good today as it was in the 1920s. And in that lesson, he talks about keeping up with the times, making your magic relevant. Isn't that funny that they're talking in this book about magicians who are out of date? So you see the magicians today wearing, they're wearing tails and, wrapping themselves up with these giant, colorful handkerchiefs and walking around with canes and wands and pulling bunnies out of their hats and using props that you've never seen before. That is as inappropriate today. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's inappropriate and out of touch with the culture today as it was back then. So Tarbell writes about keeping up with the times. Isn't that funny? You cannot borrow handkerchiefs from the audience these days. You just cannot do it. I've never done a show where I could look around the audience and see men who are wearing bowler hats. It just does not happen. The same thing with handkerchiefs and theater gloves. Many times, both the women and men would go to the theater wearing these little posh white gloves. Just doesn't happen. They used to borrow that stuff. It doesn't happen anymore. Handkerchief. It's gone. Gone. So you have to keep up with the times. Making an impression that's also featured in this lesson. Maintaining a healthy attitude towards magic. This is something that I personally have a problem with. When you're exposed to bad magic and bad magicians, you oftentimes get depressed about it. So you have to maintain a healthy attitude. Part of that, I think, is isolation, at least partial isolation, when you're creating your own work and working on it. Also very practical in this is a little article on the arrangement of programs, how to organize your show or set, which is very useful. Then we get into more sleight of hand, with coins. We have the Holman coins, the Miser's Dream, which is a classic. The Miser's Dream, by the way, I never knew where the Miser's Dream plot came from until recently. I was in a conference in Madrid on Hofzinser. It was run by Danny Dortiz, and Magic Christian was there. For those of you who know who Magic Christian is, he is the gentleman from Austria who wrote the books on Hofzinser, the big books that you have. I think there's 2 volumes in English, and then there's maybe 3 in German. I don't know. They're translating it. But the big books on Hofzinser, Magic Christian wrote them. He's the foremost researcher on Hofzinser alive today, and it was very interesting. He said that Hofzinser came up with a presentation of the Miser's Dream based on an investment banker or some famous investor back in Austria in that time, and he was always quoted in the newspaper. Why are you investing in this project? Why are you investing in this project? And he would always make like a little dance, like, it's because I see the money in the air and I just go out and grab it. And for this, Hofstadter knew that this was a cultural reference in that time, and he created the Miser's Dream with that presentation, and everybody's been using it ever since, probably without even knowing the origin of the presentation, which I find quite beautiful. There's only one person this investor who sees this money in the air, and he's just going, able to grab it. It's quite a beautiful presentation when you think about it. So that is Hofzinser. Anyways, just a small note there. He has a lot of coin work in here. Some of it is really good. Some of it is outdated. I'm not too sure if he talks about the coin ladder in here, but I'll save the coin ladder for another time. Humpty Dumpty Outdone. This is his work on the egg bag. The egg bag is another trick which I have a lot of mixed feelings about. He teaches it. It's a very classic trick. Was done back then, is done today. Again, I don't know how much it keeps up with the times. I don't know what the egg bag meant people back then as well, but it seems to be very popular. So I'm gonna leave it alone. Even though I don't fully understand the plot. Lesson number 5, I am saving you money. These are all effects with rabbits. Lesson number 6, simplicity is the key. This is the cut and restored ribbon. Spirit communication, wandering ribbon. So this is all very simple effects. As we noted in the last book club study, Malini used to do the cut and restored ribbon, not like the routine you'll see in this. In Tarbell, you have more of a classic multi-phase routine, sort of a whole rope routine, really, with the ribbon. But I'm personally a fan of a simpler presentation of just doing it once and restoring it once. But I will say this: out of all that I know, out of all that I've seen out of rope routines, I would say that it's very powerful for the audience. The problem with most magicians is they keep rope routines going for too long. But even me, I'm mystified every single time I see a rope routine, even though I know how it works. The visual illusion of those ropes getting longer and shorter and coming back together it's a very strong visual hallucination. There's some construction in my area, so things are sort of flying around if you hear any banging. Terzlaw says, the more I know about Hofzinser, the more I am impressed by his persona. Read Hofzinser. I did not really understand the genius of Hofzinser until I was exposed to it by my friends like Danny Dortiz. Danny Dortiz didn't understand really the power of Hofzinser until he was shown it by Juan Tamariz. Hofzinser is sort of this magician who created beautiful magic that's really been lost and you kind of need to be introduced to it by somebody who knows more about it because it's really obscure. But and I don't even. Anyways, I'm going to not talk about Hofstadter, but we'll talk about Hofstadter. I might. I don't know if I put Hofstadter on this book club, but I am working on a project for Hofstadter myself. So I'll share that with you, and we'll definitely be talking more Hofstadter. Let's keep going. The famous needle trick, lesson number 27. This is where I learned the needle trick. I do the needle trick for those of you who have seen my show. I do the needle trick, and reading Tarbell was very reassuring because I was quite afraid the first few times I did the needle trick. I thought I would kill myself, but I really learned how to do it reading Tarbell, and I have not had an accident with the needle trick. I know people who have had accidents. I have a few rules with the needle trick. One, I have to be completely sober. I can't even drink, a sip of a beer. That the night that I perform, I do not drink at all when I'm performing the needle trick. I also, just because I need to be 100% conscious of that needle at all times so I don't kill myself. I also don't do it if I have the slightest sore throat or cough or anything, because, again, I don't want there to be any mistakes. I was doing a tour recently in January in France and in England, and the needle trick was a prominent piece of my show that I had to cut out for most of the shows because I got the flu and I couldn't take a chance. Lesson number 28, we have magic with silks. There's a lot of silk magic in here, and to be honest, I like a lot of it, but there's a lot of tricks in this book that use weird apparatus, and by that I mean these tubes and these funnels that you can sometimes find at magic shops. They really look out of place. If you've ever seen I don't know what the heck they're supposed to be. They're literally these giant funnels and tubes. They look like these rectangle and cylinders. They're massive. You put stuff inside them and they vanish or they transform. Just very obscure props to me. I don't know what they're supposed to be. I don't know how to introduce them to the audience. I don't know what you're supposed to tell the audience they're supposed to be. I guess you can tell them there's magic props, but they're weird. So every single time I see some of those, I read the effect, but I got to tell you, it's not looking. I'm not so interested in that stuff. Lesson number 29: Divisions of Modern Magic. Now this is a really cool chapter. So unlimited opportunities in magic, specialization, presentation, creating of effects, experiments of super mentality, the Chess Knights Tour. The Chess Knights Tour. I will make a quick note of that. That is it's not a piece of magic. However, it may be one of the greatest things you could see on stage. And what the effect is you have a chessboard on stage, and you play a game of chess blindfolded. And you don't play the game of chess. What it is the audience tells you where to start and has some decisions on where to go. And your goal as a magician is to hit every single square on the board, but never hit the same square on the board twice. So Ricky Jay does this in a show quite famously. Unfortunately, it's not on video, which sucks because it's really cool to see. Ricky Jay does it, I believe, reciting poetry and reciting different obscure facts in typical Ricky Jay style. Keller also did this piece in his show. again, it's not a magic trick. It's like a feat of mental dexterity. I just find it quite magical. It's very strong. Apparently, every single night, Ricky Jay did that in his show. I believe it was 52 assistants. He would get a standing ovation in the middle of the show right then at that piece because it was so impressive the way he did it. So, just saying, trick that nobody cares about, might want to look at. We have a complete mind reading act also in chapter lesson number 29. The yogi's prediction, I don't remember that one. The X-ray cards, telepathic pictures. Lesson number 30 is making money with magic. Again, more tricks there. Number 31 is very interesting. It's a modern crystal gazing act. The Q&A act is something that is sort of been forgotten in magic. A lot of people used to do the Q&A in their acts. Alexander, for instance, would do the Q&A. What the Q&A is, by the way, uh, what the Q&A is the audience writes questions in an envelope. They seal the envelope. They submit the envelope. Sometimes they keep the envelope. The performer is then on stage and he's able to mysteriously read what's inside the envelope and then answer the question to the audience. It's a very powerful act. The only person I know who's doing it really, 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 really well today is Luke Germain. And I believe Luke Germain just did a DVD or a book on it. I don't have it yet, but I'm planning on getting it. As it's something that I would like to do in the future. I believe he does a whole show with the Q&A. Luke Germain is fantastic. If you guys don't know who Luke Germain is, look him up. He's a UK based mentalist, mind reader. He really is fantastic. Um, smart guy. Q&A, check it out, please. All right, to answer some questions. I did one mistake on the needle trick, and I don't do this anymore. Ooh, sorry to hear that. I have friends who have made mistakes on it. One of my friends ended up in the hospital. He swallowed the needle, got stuck, and they had to fish it out. Luckily, he didn't have to be operated. And I know another guy who swallowed it as well. Not too sure how he got it out, but it is a dangerous trick. I don't know of anybody who's died from the needle trick, but it's something that it's a danger that I'm always thinking of when I have it in my show. I'm very aware that it could go wrong, and I'm very focused. So it's not for everybody. Especially the way I do it, I'm set up for a very long time before I do the needle trick at the end of my show. And there's no intermission in my show, so just to give you an idea of how long I'm waiting to do the needle trick, and it is not easy. And then there's some guys. Oh, there's some guys like David Williamson. If you see him on the Luis D'Amato's DVD, Ridiculous. I believe it's called Ridiculous. He's amazing with the needles. He's just I don't even understand how he's a master. Uh, have you seen Steve Cohen's Chamber Magic? I have. I did not see it at the Waldorf Astoria, which is where it used to be. I saw it when he moved it to the New York Palace, which is the current location of the show. He moved it away from the Waldorf because the Waldorf was undergoing renovations. I saw it maybe March or April. I don't really remember. Last year, so about a year ago, more than a year ago ish. Great show. Um, My favorite Q&A is done by Scott Alexander during the Penguin Live Christmas event. You know what? I have not seen Scott Alexander's Q&A. I would love to see it. I would love to see it. I will check that out after this. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, we are an hour in. Let's keep going. Uh, lesson number 2: your relation to other magicians. Wow, magicians really got to read this. Ethics at a magic performance. I don't remember reading this in Tarbell, but I'm sure it's about not performing magic in the lobby and shuffling cards while you're in the audience. Magicians are usually really bad audience members in a magic show. I don't know why that is. I don't know why they do the things they do. But they also talk about a lot of tricks in this chapter on silk handkerchief magics, not releases, vanishes. Silks. I love silks. I really want to add some silk work to what I do. I love magic with silks. There's so many beautiful routines. I've never really worked with silks, but gosh, they're beautiful. Lesson 33 is cigarette magic. The burning cigarette and silk handkerchief, the phantom cigarette, the vanishing cigarette, the dollar bill in the cigarette, catching cigarettes in the air, an odd cigarette vanish, Cardini's floating cigarette to produce a lighted cigarette from box. That is a lot of cigarette magic. I do remember there being really good cigarette magic in this book. I haven't studied any of it closely, although I love to watch cigarette magic. If you guys want to see a master of cigarette magic today, look up Mario Lopez. Mario Lopez. He is a magician from Spain who lives in Girona. I was in Girona a few months ago. Did not know he lived there. Huge mistake because I would have visited him. He is amazing. I saw him at a magic convention years ago, and he has become fairly popular since. He does the best cigarette magic, in my opinion, in the world today. He's an expert in cigarette magic. Really, really, really clever and unique stuff. He's fantastic, and he's also good at other magic as well. In case you wanted to know. When I saw him, I believe he won a prize at the International Magic Convention in London in 2012, and he really deserved to win. He was fantastic. I was a judge on that contest, actually, and I voted for him, so I'm glad. Lesson number 34, 12 impromptu effects with cards. Interesting. 35, sleight of hand with cards. 36, more card magic. I do not remember the card magic from this book, to be quite honest. I do have to go back through it. I don't remember anything great with cards. Not to say that there's nothing great. It's just I don't have anything in my repertoire that I said, oh, I got this card trick from Tarbell. But that doesn't mean there's nothing good in it. It just means I can't remember. Lesson 37 is on Oriental magic. This is the magic of the East, or the fake East. So you have classics like Chink-a-Chink, which David Roth masterfully turned into the coin matrix. The Chinese color-changing coins, also now known as the wild coin routine. Phantom knot, mystic knot, Chiffel's knot, Japanese tie again, Hindu cut and restore turban, in case you want to add a turban to your act. Always room for that. More Oriental magic in lesson 38 with the Japano tie, the mystic smoke, the Chinese sticks, the climbing balls, the disappearing grain of rice, the Hindu jar of grain, and the productive Japanese lantern. Again, not really my cup of tea, but everything has its place. Lesson number 39 has more handkerchief magic with the handkerchief ball, the soup plate, and handkerchiefs. Soup plate. I know it has a different name. I think I know it as the chameleon plate. But the soup plate and handkerchiefs is actually a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic routine. There's a beautiful version. I don't remember the version in this book, but there's a very beautiful version in Modern Magic, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. Look up the soup plate. It's an interesting trick. They also, in this chapter on handkerchief magic, talk about the 20th century silks, which is another trick that I worked on. I have a version I'm working on. It's not in the show yet, but I call it the 21st century silks. Most people do it really weakly today. So I'll describe the effect. Which, if you're familiar with coin magic, David Roth's The 20th Century Coins is based on it. So the effect is you have two handkerchiefs, okay? You tie them together in a knot, you hang them out, you put them down, or you put them away in your pocket. Usually you put them away, or you tuck them either you tuck the knot into your pocket, so you leave both ends of the handkerchief out, or you do that with a spectator. Then you borrow a handkerchief or you introduce another handkerchief. You make it vanish. Now they pull out both ends of those handkerchiefs from the pocket, and not only are they tied together still, but in between them is the third handkerchief tied between them. It's quite a beautiful effect. Quite a mysterious effect. There's multiple methods. Nobody really does it today. People do it sort of as a gag trick today. You'll see men do it on stage with their female assistant, and they put the handkerchiefs in there, and then they magically pull the assistant's bra out, and the bra is attached to the handkerchiefs. What can I say? Magic is going downhill. It's a great trick. The original format. You have Tarbell's color changing handkerchief, double handkerchief color change, the dying handkerchief, the birth of Old Glory. There's something really powerful about handkerchief productions and vanishes and transformations. I think a lot of people know about the thumb tip today, unfortunately, but I think you can still absolutely use a thumb tip, and you should play with color changing handkerchiefs. And just whenever you see, an old piece of magic that is known with one method, like the thumb tip, just always have in mind that there's many different methods that you could potentially be using. You could be using a beautiful, many people, like when I'm performing, many times I have a pocket square in my jacket pocket. And I don't have one gimmick, but you could do the same beautiful type routine where you take out your pocket square to use it for a coin routine or whatever. And then you magically transform that pocket square into a different color. There's a lot of ways you can do that with different gimmicks, different methods. So whenever we see an old effect like this that we know one method of, and we know like these cheesy giant handkerchiefs that nobody's ever seen, just always look at the what I call the spirit of the effect, which is what the effect is meant to be, intrinsically inside itself, and how can you bring that to life in the version that you do. So that is yeah. All right, lesson 40, character analysis related to magic. I don't remember what that lesson is about. I've read it. It's just in a different order from what I've read it in, so that's why I'm not remembering that. Lesson 41 is billiard ball manipulation. There's not a lot of people who do billiard ball manipulation today. I would highly, highly look into it. There's a great book by Jim Steinmeier written on the magic of Alan Wakeling, who was just such a genius mind in magic, Alan Wakeling. And if you want to learn billiard ball manipulation, I would read that. I think there's video of Alan Wakeling online. I'm not sure. There's a couple guys who do it. Nobody's really doing it. It's a beautiful thing. There's some cool effects. I just think it's a classy thing that you don't see today. And the billiard balls actually do age well. The props are not uh, out of this world. I mean, everybody knows what those billiard balls are, and because billiards still around and very popular. So I would look into that. Let's see. Scott Alexander, we had a talk with him at Blackpool 2016. Nice. I've never been to Blackpool. I would love to go, and I'm going to check out the Scott Alexander Q&A after this. Well, not exactly after this, but soon enough. I like cigarette magic, but more and more people are giving up smoking in Poland. That's from Jerslow. Um, yeah, cigarette magic is not as popular as it used to be for a variety of reasons. Everywhere smoking is less popular, but anybody who does magic at bars and stuff, you will always see people hanging outside the bar smoking. It's great to be able to do at least one thing with cigarettes, even if it's a simple thing of making it vanish and reappear. People will always, if you're standing outside of a bar, people will always ask you, "Oh, can I borrow a cigarette?" or "Do you have a light?" Yeah, just be aware that these are things that happen in our lives that we can prepare for in advance and create little routines with. So we won't go into more detail about that, but just think about that. What people are asking you day to day. Lopez is great. Yes, he is great. In Poland, magicians do this with random women from the audience. I'm sure you're talking about 20th century silks. That is, yeah, yeah. And I also saw one guy who did this with the small boy's panties. There was a lot of tears, of course. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. That is pretty insane. Um, I prefer doing it with the handkerchiefs. Uh, I guess you could do it with the small boy's panties. I'm not really interested in coming up with a method for that one, but it's very interesting that is how people choose to do it. Tells you a lot about the state of magic. Ron says Guy Hollingworth has a great billiard ball routine. Really, I have not seen Guy Hollingworth perform the billiard balls. I will have to look that up, or at least I don't remember seeing him perform the billiard balls. That is interesting. I will look that up. Thank you for that. All right, where was I? Lesson 42. Man, this is dragging on. Lesson 42, the clean cut color changing handkerchief. A lot more routines here. Lesson 43, coat and hat productions. Interesting. Productions used to be um, something that was done a lot. People would produce rabbits and doves and little bunnies, sausages, fruit from people's jackets. I don't see a lot of magicians doing it today. I always think it's a cool, thing to do in the middle of the routine. Like, let's say you have to introduce something that nobody has. Like, oh, does anybody have an egg for this routine? Or can I borrow a lemon? Does anybody have, a bowler hat? Does anybody have, a pair of scissors? I think it's really funny. It can be really funny in a show if you magically produce it from somebody's coat. What are you talking about? Of course you have it. The audience says, no, I don't have it. Yes, you do. Get up here. What's this in your pocket? And you pull it out. I think it's a funny moment. You see guys like Mac King do it a lot these days. I'm trying to think who else does it. Juan Tamariz does it with a variety of things. But it used to be a lot more common. It's kind of hard to find people doing that these days. But it's a cool way of producing objects that are unusual, that are just odd for you to have on hand or as part of the set. It's one of the big problems, like management in a show, your prop management. Uh, you need certain stuff for the show, but where do you want to keep it? Do you want to keep it on the stage? You want to keep it off the stage? How are you going to introduce it? It's all things to think about. Which leads us to chapter 44, chemical and mechanical magic. This is a really cool chapter. I think it's kind of outdated right now, but there's some really cool books on chemical magic. I think the best one out there is just called Chemical Magic. I forget the name of the author, but look up Chemical Magic. I believe we also sell it at Conjuring Arts as a PDF, um, or at least Conjuring Arts used to sell it. I don't know if they still sell it. I don't know, but anyways, it used to be up there. Uh, you will get in there a novel transmission of smoke, wine, and water, the wandering glass and bottle, a magical transformation, a cooking lesson, the Welsh rarebit. I still have not had the time to check out that whiskey water transposition that we talked about in our last book club, the one from Nalini. I have not yet been able to try it, but hopefully soon. Uh, I need to get a bottle of whiskey. That's the only thing I'm missing, so maybe I'll get one and try it out. But yeah, it has a bunch of cool stuff in that chapter on chemical magic. Lesson 45, spiritualistic magic, the living and the dead, spirit photography, the psychic paper, spirit slate writing, a parlor seance. Um, this is all really cool stuff. I would say be very careful on how you perform it. Some places don't like you to do spiritualistic type magic. I know that many schools in America will not book you if you do that type of magic with spirit slate or the spirit bell. Um, Anything that is in that category, it's in some areas in America are very they stay away from it. So, and it can be very, I don't know, it can have an effect on people. So just be very careful when you're performing that type of magic. It's very destabilizing magic for people who believe in communicating with spirits and stuff. I would just say be very aware that to you it seems like a very simple trick, but if you're performing something and you have a story about somebody who's dead who's coming back to write a message or ring a bell, uh, or you have photographs of people who are dead and some people who are alive, it can have an effect on people. So just be aware of that. Of course, also when you're performing a seance, there's some people who will just not take part in that and who will be against it. I myself do not like seances, even as a presentation thing. It is something that personally creeps me out, and that I don't want to have anything to do with. Yeah, I I would rather stay away from that stuff. But feel free to play with it if you would like. If you want to contact dead spirits instead of performing magic, you can. However, I will not be responsible for what happens. Number 46. More spiritualistic magic, dark seances, the table, the dark circle, Jizzle's mysterious lights, Dr. Bridges' thought projection, the Siberian chain escape, which I'm sure is a reference to Houdini, his famous Siberian escape in, I believe, 1908. The cabinet seance, another good tie, the throwaway coat tie. Interesting. 47, you have the complete chapter devoted to the linking rings, the Chinese linking rings, as they call it. I'm personally impartial to the rings. but I like some versions of it. I'm actually a fan of. There's a young man in America doing a version that I like. His name is Masato, and he has a cool version with these little rings. Illusionist made a DVD of it a few years ago. I actually like that routine quite a bit. I think you have to be very careful with certain routines, like rope routines, linking rings, that they can drag on for too long, and you sort of weaken the magic. The same with the cups and balls. Many routines. You just have to be careful. You have to be aware of what you're doing and how many times you're doing it. Like, just because you can do an effect over and over doesn't mean that you necessarily should. I don't know that it's more powerful to have 8 rings than two or three rings or 4 rings. So just always keep these things in mind, but also follow your own taste and your own judgment. Maybe you see something in using 8 rings, or you know doing stuff a different way, or doing it in the classic way. Do whatever you feel like. You know just be thinking about it though. Lesson 48: more Oriental magic. Tarbell's mysterious firecrackers. Fuller's balloon and silk. Shingling, Chinese lantern production, the Hindu mango tree growth, Tarbell's Hindu plant growth, comedy flower growth. 49 also continues a lot of Chinese magic. Production of large bowl of water, production of stack of 4 bowls of water. More productions of bowls, production of a child, modern production of bowl of water on table, Chinese production of doves, mysterious self-filling Loda, Chingling Foods magic water can, mystery of the paper ball, egg frog, and baby chicken. Yeah, I don't, I don't know what to say about that. I am sort of outdated, in my opinion. But I think it would be really cool if I saw somebody doing it well. I've never seen anybody do it well. I've heard about people doing it well. I've read about it. I can imagine somebody doing it well. It's just every single time I've seen somebody doing like a Chinese traditional style magic, it is very you know uh, mediocre. Let's continue. Chapter 50, the Tarbell Rope Mystery. Chapter 51, Illusions, the Mystery of King Tut, Who and Which. Um, by the way, for those of you who don't know, a lot of the magic in this book is relevant at that time. The Mystery of King Tut. They had just discovered, Carter had just discovered the tomb of King Tut, and there were major excavations in Egypt. And, there was like a whole Egypt frenzy, and the U.S. and in the U.K. at that time. The same, it was just a different time. People saw the world differently. You really have to use what is relevant to our times, and there's ways to do that. I should do a whole thing on that later. How to make magic relevant today. How to make what are the mysteries that still exist today. I think that would be a really interesting lecture on because people don't believe in Egyptian magic these days. They don't believe in the mysteries of the Orient, the uh, the Indian fakirs, the Hindu fakirs. They don't believe in that stuff anymore. So you have to go through different avenues. 52, building illusions. Again, these are bigger type of illusions using black art, trunks. 53 continues with escape and substitution illusions. This is, again, exactly as the title describes it. 54, the black art table. Very hard to use black art. Very hard. I don't know many people who are using black art these days outside of theaters. You really need your own theater to be able to use black art properly, you cannot just move black art and set up in different spaces and rooms. It does not work that way. So it's very reliant on the light in the room. You just can't use black art as a method these days. I'm sorry. You unless it's just very hard. Just very hard. I don't think it's a good. I think it's a good method. I just think it has its place. By the way, chapter 55. Oh, we're near the end. Thank God. The Egyptian mummy. This is the dollhouse illusion. Mystery of the dancing girls. 56. The sword box. Again, these are bigger type of illusions. 57. The Chinaman, the ghost and the cat. The mystery of the three ghosts. These are big illusions. 58, The Phantom of the Circus. Don't remember that one. And then finally, 59, Making the Box Office Pay. This is how to make money doing magic. Renting a theater, making money doing magic for the public. And finally, lesson 60, after you've gone through all that, you're totally exhausted. Advertising and publicity, how to sell your show after you design it. Again, many people have commented that you can design a whole magic show off of the material in Tarbell, and you can. So make use of it. It's a beautiful book. So keep going. Gosh, that has exhausted me going through that. Just the title of the lessons. They're so numerous. This is a course that's supposed to take you a few years to go through. You are not supposed to read this all at once. As I said, this was a very popular book. It still is. I don't know how many copies it's sold, but it's sold quite a bit. In 1993, they made what they call a Tarbell scrapbook, which is sort of a collector's book. It includes the original lessons that didn't make it into the previous volumes. I've never read those lessons, but apparently they're in there, and with some articles and writings by Dr. Tarbell, who I don't know if he was a doctor. Maybe he just used it as a name. So his name, by the way, was Harlan Eugene Tarbell. He was born on February 23rd, 1890, and he died June 16th, 1960. He was a professional illustrator, which is why you see the illustrations of the book looking so good. He did them all. He also did, I believe, shapography and shadowgraphy. He was a filmmaker. He made a movie in the 1930s called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. He was born in Delavan, which is in Illinois. He started out his career at 12 years old making newspapers not making newspapers, making cartoons for newspaper. He would get lessons from the famous magician known as Dante. And 1911, he moved to Chicago. So this is correct. Sorry, I'm just reading this as I'm transmitting the information. I don't know if he learned from Dante, but he later became friends with Dante, and he would watch Dante when he was a child. He would walk to go see the shows whenever Dante was in town. Dante was, I wonder what year that was. I guess must have been in the early 1900s, maybe like 1902, just to give you context. So, like the year 1902, The Expert at the Card Table had just been released. Tarbell was watching Dante's show. Houdini was performing at that time as well. Houdini was not well known in America at that time. I believe he was maybe in Europe. I'm not too sure where Houdini was. Um, Thurston was, I believe, also very young at that time. I guess Keller was performing also in America when Tarbell was a child. Not too sure what years Keller retired, but yeah, he should have been active. Da, da, da. So yes, he worked as a professional illustrator, and he illustrated many catalogs, uh, magic catalogs. He first learned magic and did illustrations. Well, he didn't first learn magic, but he first did illustrations for Arthur Buckley. If you guys don't know who Arthur Buckley is, I highly recommend his trilogy of books. But he also did a small periodical called Lessons in Magic, which was a series of 12 lessons, and Tarbell did the artwork for that as well. Unlike unlike Arthur Buckley advertised it in the Sphinx, and he was more known to magicians. But Tarbell, I don't know what the deal was with these publishers, but they seemed to be a lot bigger, which is why I think this sold 10,000 copies in 4 years, which is a lot of copies to sell. Da, da, da. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, guys. So this is the book. Tarbell wrote a couple of books. After this, I have not read any of them, but there's about 7 of them that he wrote. Most of them are like little stunt books and after dinner entertainment books. Should be of interest. I haven't read them yet though, but maybe they're good. Can't really say. Um, yeah, I think this sort of wraps up Tarbell. Um, you gotta hand it to Tarbell for creating this. This is many people's introduction to magic. Literally tens of thousands of magicians have studied these series of books and this course over the years. It's pretty special. Uh, Most of the biggest names in magic that you see today have studied this book, have performed tricks from this book, and still perform some tricks from this book in their working repertoire. This is a important piece of magic. It also has some cool magic from the magicians of the day that's kind of under the radar. I don't know if you guys noticed me dropping Cardini's name in here, but Cardini did contribute material to this, and Cardini was fantastic. And there's also other great magic in this, so definitely worth going through. One of my favorite things about this book is the illustration. It's just very clear on on how to do the magic. So definitely, you know, check out this book, enjoy it. You, it's a big read, and it's a hard read for me at least. But I have learned a lot from it. The essays in this book are fantastic. So I really think somebody should just take the essays out of this book and publish them as their own little booklet. They're that good, and people ignore them. Uh, I don't know what else to say about Tarbell. I don't know what else to say. Great series. It's very nostalgic for me to be reading this. This is one of I actually the first time I read Tarbell, I had won it. What I mean by won it, I was given an award in Toronto by the Magic Store Browsers Den of Magic. It was like the Young Magicians Award. I won it a few years ago, and I got a nice certificate and a set of Tarbell, and that was my introduction to it. And I've read it, and I've loved it ever since. And then I sort of learned to hate it when I was making a PDF version. Don't tell anyone. um, but I don't hate it. It's a great book. Again, it's an important book. It needs to be approached the right way because of how big it is and the contents. Go through it. Use post-it notes. 95% of it you will forget. It's just that type of book. It's so big, you're going to forget most of the material, most of the things. But use some post-it notes. Take notes of ideas that you like because there's some wonderful things in here. And there's wonderful things in here that I've never seen anybody perform. And there's wonderful things that I've performed and wonderful things that other people perform. It's just something that needs to be sort of researched and developed and studied and sort of brought back to life. And, the new chapters, which I didn't even talk about in this, the new chapters uh, mostly compiled by Harry Lorraine are also wonderful. Let me see if I can get to them. Harry Lorraine did a lot for Magic. He contributes a lot of his magic to it. Really, really great stuff from Harry Lorraine. Harry Lorraine has a lot of books out in Magic, as you guys know. And definitely worth studying. Harry Lorraine is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful magician. Very smart guy, and Harry Lorraine's one of the few guys in Magic who's actually been really successful performing Magic in front of the public. He's written several books on Magic for the public, books on memory, books on other stuff. So Harry Lorraine was sort of the right guy to pick this up and turn it into what it is today, continue that legacy, because there have been many courses in Magic that have sort of been brushed away with time that nobody remembers. Arthur Buckley, I had forgotten about that for a while. I was literally just reminded when I saw the notice of it. But many of these courses have been written and attempted, but Tarbell is sort of the only one that's been really, really successful. And we get to enjoy it now. I guess Stars of Magic, the closest thing to it was Stars of Magic. For those of you who don't know, Stars of Magic, which I believe we're also going to be studying later on this year, I think it's on the book club list. Stars of Magic started out like this as a correspondence course. You would sign up for Stars of Magic and get each lesson mailed to you. So you get a trip from Divernon, and then a trip from, Francis Carlisle and Slidini, and so on and so on. So very, very hard to encapsulate how important this was for Magic. This is really something that needs to be remembered and studied today. Great book, great series of books. Hope you guys enjoyed this, got something out of it. Again, I'm not an expert in Tarbell. Do not know all the material as well as I should. Not as elite. I do not know the material in this book the way I know the material in the Nalini book and many of the books that I'm going to talk about, the other book clubs. But I really wanted to do this series of books just to talk to you about it because I really do believe it's important. And it gave me a solid foundation in that I was able to study different things about Magic, which I wasn't interested in before: history, psychology, presentation, how to make a career, This sort of served as a foundation for many of the things that I would do later in my life. So I'm very grateful for reading this book. So please, please, please check it out. If you haven't read it, if you want to reread it, reread it. If you're like me and you just keep it on your shelf, keep it on your shelf. And, every once in a while, go through it again, every few years. Just set it as a little project to go through it and take notes, and you'll find new stuff. That's one of the beautiful things about books is as you mature in magic, you'll see potential in things that you didn't see potential in them before for. So definitely check out this book. Thank you guys for watching and joining. Really sorry about the delay in doing this. I was flying 2 days ago, and then yesterday I was supposed to do it, and then I got caught up with a bunch of my orders for the Kickstarter, and I had to go out last night because to meet Paul Wilson, who landed in town, and I didn't know. It was sort of like a surprise, so I went to go see him last night. Sorry, guys, that I ditched you, but even if I wouldn't have, I just was not. I was so tired yesterday just from all the traveling that I thought it would be better to do it today. So I'm glad that I took a little break and I did it today. I really do want to stay on schedule in the future, which is why I set it up in the calendars the way that I did. So yeah, hopefully it won't happen again. So sorry for not making it on time. I would have done it from the hotel in California, but I was flying and then the timing wasn't right, and I'm like, I'll just do it when I'm at home. So I am home right now. And I'll tell you where I was just briefly before I log out of here. I was at a conference in California called the EG Conference. I was there with Eric Mead and Apollo Robbins and Jamie Ian Swiss and a bunch of other interesting people not related to magic. And it's sort of like a TED type conference where people give talks and stuff. And it was my first year there doing a talk and performing some magic. Eric Mead conducted like a little interview on stage. So that video I will have uploaded soon. As soon as I get it, I'll see if I can clear the rights to put it up on YouTube. It's a pretty cool interview. But yeah, I got to go. I got to take my dog to the vet to get a little shot right now. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon. And anyways, I'll write it out, but we'll communicate in the comments like before, because I do have some more stuff that I want to say about Tarbell. But we'll do that later. Keep the conversation going on. I will see your comments. It might take me a little while to respond, just because I'm trying to get all these cards out for my playing cards of Hidden Leaves, but I will be with you shortly. So thank you guys for your patience, and I hope you guys enjoyed this, and have a good day.